Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new PennyWise podcast. I'm your host, Teri Barr, and PennyWise, of course, is brought to you by Lee Enterprises. Happy to have joining me today. Oh boy, do we have a lot to talk about today with regards to infrastructure and, in particular, housing. This is going to be a really interesting conversation. Natalie Campisi, and Natalie is a mortgage and housing analyst with Forbes Advisor. Natalie, thanks for being here with me again.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You know, we are hearing a lot of discussion with budgets coming out across all the different states and also at the federal level, talking about infrastructure, but really targeting housing. Why is this such a big deal right now?
Housing is sort of all the buzz, and housing is such a big issue for everyone, whether you're a home buyer, a renter, a high wage earner or a low wage earner. And Biden has made sure to address some of the gaps that we're seeing in housing between some of our highest earners and lowest earners in this $1 trillion infrastructure bill. So it's sort of a once in a lifetime opportunity to pour money into some issues that have been going on for a while.
Yeah, and we're hearing the housing market is still, it's been blowing up for probably the better part of the last year. Is that right?
It's incredible. I mean,
Yeah.
it's truly incredible. What we're seeing is sort of the opposite of what happened during the housing bubble and ultimate crash in 2008. Is
Right.
back then it was lots of inventory and a lot of borrowers that might be considered low risk borrowers. So
Mhm.
they were getting big mortgages and very risky, borrowers and mortgages. So it just led to this crash. And right now what we have is a low inventory. So few houses and really low risk borrowers. So people with high credit scores with big down payments lining up to get a house.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so when you think about what the president is trying to put together, how would something, and the numbers astounding, how would something like this end up being funded?
So it will be funded in a few ways. One of the main ways would be through taxes. So he's proposing to raise the corporate taxes from, I think right now it's around 21%. So it would go up to 28%.
Wow.
Yeah, so a little bit of a bump. But when you consider that before Trump, they were 35%. Trump slashed them to 21%. So Biden's sort of splitting the difference. He's not going all the way back up to that 35% number. So it would be around 28%.
Okay.
And then they would fund these housing projects through a variety of things, some community block grants, different state and local funding, that sort of thing. But
Yeah.
taxes would be a big way to do that.
Okay. And even though this really is a federal plan, it sounds like they got to get some buy-in from leaders in all the different states too, if they really want to make something happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So they have to, get the cooperation of states. Hopefully, states will take some of these incentives that Biden is proposing to throw their
Mm.
way, some tax
Mhm.
incentives to loosen these strict zoning laws so that we can build more affordable housing.
Okay. And of course, he has what I guess we would consider five main steps to making this happen. And one of those is affordable housing. But in particular, I find this interesting. He's targeting affordable housing for renters. That's step one. What is that all about?
Yep, absolutely. So
Yeah.
he wants to, in a couple different ways, he wants to add more inventory to the rental supply pool right now that we have. So that might include building new affordable rental units, as well as retrofitting and updating some units that need to be updated. And he wants to target some areas that aren't represented. So maybe tribal communities, rural communities, places like that.
Mm.
And another way he wants to help is by injecting about $40 billion into public housing.
Oh, wow.
That yeah, it's really important, and public housing has been hurting for a long time. So he would update public housing, and he'd also make sure that there's broadband access and even
Yeah.
energy efficient energy efficient upgrades and things like that.
That is all so important. And even though we're talking about renters right now, I think it's a similar situation, isn't it? The inventory is low to find an affordable place to rent.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. It's just across the board, it's really difficult. So there's a lot of work to be done. And on the flip side, by doing this, you're putting a lot of people to work.
Oh,
You're really, increasing the jobs that we need to sort of be increased right now. We got that big dip in employment numbers because of
right.
COVID. So this would really help the job market as well.
Oh, that would be awesome. Yeah. The number two in
Absolutely.
like the main steps is building affordable homes. Imagine that, because we know right now as you mentioned earlier in our conversation here, the market, you can't keep up with the cost of housing right now. So, how would this work? How does he think he could build affordable homes?
So it's a couple ways. So
Okay.
again, it would depend on taxes, and he wants to give builders and contractors big tax incentives to build about 500,000
Wow.
affordable homes. It's a big number and it's still nowhere near enough, but it's a start. So that would give people who might not have had access to home ownership a shot at becoming homeowners. We know there's a big divide between white and Black homeowners. And part of
Oh,
that
yeah.
is that Black homeowners have not had the luxury of getting some of the generational wealth that white homeowners
Mhm.
have because of inequities in laws and rules and things. So this would help to narrow that gap.
Okay, we could answer a couple of problems then with this affordable housing move. So that's pretty terrific. There's also the idea of eliminating exclusionary zoning laws. What does that mean for people who have never heard of that before?
Well, if you live in places like California where inventory is so low
Yeah.
and home prices are so expensive, you might be familiar with exclusionary zoning laws. And basically what that is where there are laws that prevent builders from putting in multifamily units in certain neighborhoods, or putting in smaller units, maybe houses with smaller yards. So there are all of these laws, and what happens is that it shrinks the number of homes available, it
Mm.
shrinks the number of affordable homes available, and it also increases current homeowners' property values. So homeowners, they don't really have to do anything, but by virtue of these laws, their property values rise. And when they go to
Mhm.
resell, it's super expensive. And so that's why you have in places like Los Angeles, 50% of the population, I believe, is the renters. And you don't
Wow.
see that in the rest of the country. And part of that is these sort of really strict zoning laws.
Makes sense, doesn't it?
Yep.
Wow.
So
um,
although, oh, go ahead, sorry.
no, you go right ahead.
I was just going to say, the federal government can't change those laws. So what Biden wants to do is put some of these tax incentives in place so that states will roll back some of them. I might have said that, but not sure.
No, I don't think you can emphasize that enough, because
Okay.
again, it brings the government together at all levels, having to sort of play nice with each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay. How about updating? And we did talk a little bit about this just a minute ago, but upgrading, updating. Oh boy, this sounds like a big project, but it probably really needs to be done. Working on public housing.
It's a big project and it
Yeah.
absolutely needs to be done. When you think about housing, you think about equality of life and
Mhm.
for not only, individuals, but their children. If you have a multi-generational home, you want to make sure that where you're living is livable. And some of these places are just really in need of repair, upgrades, and that might include things like solar panels to make it more affordable, which also trickles down to taxpayers.
Mhm.
Looking at, the cost of public housing, but also, access to high-speed internet and things like that.
Oh, wow. And boy, did we find out how really important the internet is in the last year, especially.
No kidding. Yep.
Wow. Yeah, I've had some neighbors text when their internet goes out and they're both working at home and trying to educate their kids at the same time and no internet. I can't imagine not being without it. So thanks for bringing that up. That's really important. And then I love this one, the whole idea of just clean energy investments kind of across the board. I
Yep.
know, yeah, the solar panels are becoming a big deal, even on, everybody's personal homes. They're putting it on there to save some money.
Yes, this is something that Biden included in the infrastructure bill, and it's really important. And he would invest money in upgrading some of our outdated technology and putting in sort of these these solar panels and clean energy investments into new buildings and existing buildings.
Okay, great. Well, that pretty much breaks it down. So what can we take away from this? And even more importantly, maybe when could something actually happen?
That's a great question. One thing to take away is that, states and cities are really far behind in infrastructure since
Yes.
the last sort of economic downturn. And
Mhm.
so this is sort of a long time coming. And I think it would really infuse not only dollars into our economy and get people working again, but it really would up the quality of life for so many Americans. So I think that's one thing to consider when you're looking at this big number, but what is it? What is it kind of bringing back to Americans, and not just now, but generations from now? So it is kind of a shocking number, as you mentioned before, but it's also an investment in our country and the people who live here. As far as when this will get passed, it might take a while. There's going to be some back and forth. So, of course, this is just Biden's blueprint. You have some Democratic lawmakers that want even more spending. AOC and Bernie Sanders just proposed a Green New Deal for public housing, which would
Wow.
infuse $100 billion into public housing. So that's quite a bit more than what Biden's proposing. So
Mhm.
there will be back and forth, and the Democrats are going to pretty much need every vote to get this passed. So I think we'll have to wait a little bit to see it go through.
Okay. And I guess here's the biggest question. Do you think it can happen? I mean,
I
it
do.
needs to happen, right? But will it happen?
Absolutely. It definitely needs to happen. I do think
Mhm.
it will happen. We might see some compromises in there so that it can happen. So it'll be interesting to see, where they cut and what sort of the ways they decide to fund some of these projects. So, but I do think it will eventually happen.
Okay. Wow.
Yep.
Natalie Campisi with Forbes Advisor, and she is a mortgage and housing analyst. Terrific to talk with you. I know this can be a tough topic, but thanks for breaking it down for us. And we'll be watching to see what happens with this.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us for a new PennyWise podcast. I'm Teri Barr.